How's it going, friends? My name is Michael, and I want to welcome you as we continue to explore the strangest parts of the scriptures. As followers of Jesus, we believe the Bible to be inspired by God and authoritative for our lives. Yet, let's be honest, it gets pretty weird. But what I've come to appreciate over the years is that all the strange actually has significance. And when you read weird things, it should make you wonder what's going on, not worry that you've staked your entire life on a lie. It should spark a curiosity to go deeper and explore what's really being communicated. And so every month, I want to help you do just that. And this month, we're talking about face-to-face conversations with God. Because in Exodus 33, we run into what seems like a major contradiction. In verse 11, we're told the Lord would speak to Moses face-to-face as one speaks to a friend, which is amazing. But then just a few verses later, in verses 19 and 20, Moses asks to see God's glory, and God responds, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence, and I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But, he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Okay, so which is it? Did Moses speak to God face to face, or could he not see God's face? What's more, this raises some really important follow-up questions like, does God even have a face? And why exactly would seeing his face kill somebody? Well, before we answer those questions, we need to acknowledge something important. The Bible repeatedly teaches that God is spirit, which means he doesn't have a physical body the way we do. And so when we read that Moses spoke with God face to face, there are really only two possible ways to understand what's happening. The first possibility is what's called a Christophany. Now, that's just a fancy theological word for an appearance of Jesus before his birth in Bethlehem. You see, throughout the Old Testament, there are moments where a mysterious figure appears who seems to be distinct from God and yet somehow is God at the same time. And many Christians believe some of those encounters were appearances of the pre-incarnate Christ. So it's certainly possible that Moses was literally speaking with the Son of God before Jesus took on flesh. And honestly, that's not a crazy idea. However, while a Christophany is possible, I don't think that's the most likely explanation in this particular passage. Instead, I think the better explanation is something called anthropomorphism. And anthropomorphism simply means the author of Exodus was describing God with human characteristics so that we could understand what was going on. You see, at this point in Israel's story, things aren't going well. The people have just worshipped the golden calf. Moses is interceding on their behalf. And before the tabernacle is officially built, Moses has a special tent set up outside the camp called the tent of meeting. And whenever Moses goes there, God's presence would descend in a pillar of cloud and Moses would meet with God. And it's in that context that we're told that the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Now, when we hear the phrase face to face, we immediately picture two people standing in front of each other. But that's not always what that phrase means. Even today, we use expressions like, we had a heart to heart. If I said that, you would know I simply mean I had a very open and honest dialogue with another person. In a similar vein, the phrase face to face in Exodus is used to describe intimacy and closeness. The point is not that Moses literally stared into God's eyeballs. The point is that he enjoyed an incredibly unique relationship with God. And then, as the story goes, Moses asks for something even more. He says, show me your glory. To which God responds, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Except this time, face means something different. Because remember, God is spirit. He doesn't have a physical body as we do. And so in this instance, the biblical author is using the phrase God's face to communicate something true about him. The same thing they do when they talk about God's arms or his eyes or his ears or his hands. In this instance, the point is the degree of revelation Moses can handle. Essentially, how much of God's glory Moses can actually experience. Think about it this way. When you see somebody's face, you see everything. You recognize them, you understand who they are, you see all of their expressions. But if all you see is someone's back as they walk past you, you get only a partial glimpse. You know they're there, but you're not seeing the full picture. And that's essentially what God is communicating. Moses cannot experience the full unveiled reality of God's glory. It would just be too much, more than a sinful human could possibly bear. So God graciously limits the revelation. It's kind of like staring directly into the sun. The problem isn't that the sun is evil. The problem is that your eyes aren't built for that level of brilliance. And in a similar way, fallen humanity isn't capable of fully beholding the infinite glory of God. And so when God says, no one may see my face and live, he's essentially saying no one can experience the fullness of who I am in their current condition. Now, that's neat and all, but here's something to really maybe blow your mind. Thousands of years later, one of Jesus' disciples named Philip, he asked Jesus to show him the Father. And Jesus responds, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Think about that. The thing Moses longed for, the thing Moses could only glimpse, the thing that would overwhelm a human being. Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Why? Because Jesus is God in the flesh, the glory of God wrapped in humanity, the fullness of God made visible. In fact, the Apostle Paul says, in Christ, all the fullness of the deity lives in bodily form. And for one brief moment during Jesus' earthly ministry, the veil gets fully pulled back. At the Transfiguration, Jesus shines with heavenly glory. And guess who shows up? Moses, the same Moses who once stood in the cleft of a rock trying to catch a glimpse of God's glory. Now he's standing face to face with the glorified Christ. And I don't think that's an accident. It's as though the story is coming full circle. The glimpse Moses received in Exodus finds its fulfillment in Jesus. Well, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time as we keep exploring all the weird parts of the Bible.